Okay, the Planning Commission meeting for April 11th, 2023 will now come to order. And I'm going to call the roll. Chip Place.
Here.
Tammy Snagus.
Here.
Jim Miller.
Here.
Warren Hardenstein.
Here.
Farhat Shah. Ed Garono.
Here.
And Chairman Ford is present. So we have everyone present. We have a quorum.
Says I'm here.
The first item on our agenda tonight is a site plan approval request brought by the Mayor and City Council of Havre, and it's for an addition to the Decoy Museum. And so, Tim, do you have anything you want to?
Did everyone have a chance to read the staff report that was provided?
I'm sorry?
Did everyone have a chance to read the staff report that was provided?
I did. I hope everyone did.
Okay.
Yeah. And before you start, there's a packet of handouts up here. Do you know what this is?
I haven't seen those.
Well, it looks like I'm going to go ahead and hand these out to the commissioners. I think it's meant for us. Okay, let's see. 1, 2, it's a whole bunch of these. So let's go three that way.
How about one for Tim?
Yeah, I'll take one too, please.
2, 3 that way.
For Tim.
Thanks.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
So this request was for site plan review. It's for an expansion to the Decoy Museum. I'm sure everybody's familiar with it. It's at 215 Giles Street. That property is one big parcel that also includes the Maritime Museum, and that's all owned by the city of Havre de Grace. The full parcel is 5.59 acres, but the addition that's being added on is 5,176 square feet. Again, it's being used as a city decoy museum. It's in the RB Residential Business Zoning District, which allows museums. To the north and west of the property is some R1 residential zoning, and there is a bit of housing surrounding the site. As far as utilities are concerned, the Decoy Museum will continue to use the same water and sewer services that it is using currently connected to the city. This requires site plan review by the Planning Commission in accordance with 155-6A2, which requires expansion of an existing non-residential building that increases gross floor area by more than 20%. We've reviewed the plans that we have in front of us, and from what we could tell by what was presented, it meets code. There were some things that were missing that I have in the recommendations. So according to 155-16A, architectural elevations need to be submitted. Grading, erosion control, and stormwater management and other utilities need to be reviewed by the Department of Public Works. The city will need to see what the impact of the new addition will have on water and sewer. I'm assuming since this is a city property that there wouldn't be capital cost recovery fees, but that's up to administration to decide. We'll still need to know what the impact is as done by a fixture count. It's not written in the staff report, but in order to perform that fixture count, we need to see a floor plan. We need to know what's going on there. We're not sure of the use of the new addition. The property's in a 100-year flood zone, so before receiving a building permit, they'll have to speak with the city's floodplain manager to make sure that all the requirements of Chapter 78 are met. It's in the ID area of the Chesapeake Bay Critical Area and will require mitigation under Chapter 49. And the one comment that Public Works had preliminarily off of what was provided was that gutters and roof stormwater runoff will need to flow into the regenerative step pools that are on the east end of the property, and that a discharge plan will need to be approved by Public Works. So this is the property in blue. I'm sure everybody knows where this is located. And I did do a quick parking analysis. So parking wasn't included as part of this. Parking's a little bit difficult sometimes to calculate because we are we're mostly counting areas where there's not something, if that makes sense. So where people can be. So if you're in a supermarket, we're not including storage areas, for instance. So in this situation, to do an existing count of parking was a bit difficult because a lot of the museum is filled up with exhibits. So there's not a lot of space. There's also a gift shop. There's also a conference area upstairs, and we don't know the existing. We don't know what the plans are for the addition that's being proposed. However, on here you can see the red circle is the decoy museum. I counted 9 spots in front, 9 parking spaces available in front of the museum. That part of the street has parallel parking that has lines drawn, so that it's marked parallel parking on the Giles leading up to that. As I mentioned, it shares a property with the Maritime Museum. So there's an area just up to the north. I'm not sure if my pointer is working or not. I can't see it. Just to the north, there's an orange area that's parking. That was about an additional 14 spaces for both areas. And then there's a red area where there was a building next to the Maritime Museum that's been torn down. It's currently paved. It could be used for parking, but there's no way to get in there. So there is some potential parking. Obviously, there's street parking all around here with the lighthouse and the park in this area. And then it's only 1,000 feet walk, and that's not by the flight of a bird. That was actually measured going along the promenade into the marina. So there is ample parking nearby, likely, but we wouldn't be able to fully determine that until we know what the use of that addition is. That's it for me, unless anybody has questions.
I have one. How would you consider this parcel that this project is proposed for? How would you consider its contiguousness with other city property that is close by, such as down at the park and such as along the promenade and over to the city marina area?
It's all contiguous and connected by the promenade or by the nearby street structure.
So essentially, we're really, if we want to be technical about it, we can count parking that's anywhere in all that contiguous spread of public property, from the lighthouse all the way over to the city marina. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I think just where it's located and what the mitigation that's already been done for critical area and some of these things, there's not really much area left if you were going to try to park on site anyway. And this is sort of an area, like you said, it is all city property, but it's all sort of one big area from the marina all the way up through the parks that are purposely interconnected that way.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where I'm going with that, is that to ensure that we have collectively enough parking to handle just about anything that goes on there.
Yeah, I think so. Again, just to be sure, we would need to know what's going on in that addition. Mm-hmm. We don't have any information on that yet.
Okay. Was anyone in here from the, oh, I'm sorry, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Tim, do they still use they've, of course, introduced the stormwater runoff trenches. Now, they used to use that whole area as parking, what was green grass. There's still a sizable portion of it closest to Market. Do they use that for parking anymore?
On Market Street north of
on the site.
Right?
It's a big field there.
Oh, okay, yeah, I know what you're saying. They may, but it's not paved or marked. But they maybe they use it for special events and that sort of thing.
That's what they've done in the past,
Right.
is they've just taken the whole field and parked it up with, you know, parking lot attendants and all that kind of stuff.
Right. On an average day, though, if you were somebody driving by, you wouldn't know to park in that grassy area. But yeah, I mean, if it's possible.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
I got a question.
Yeah.
Why is the planning commission looking at this at all? This is city property, and in the past, anything that was put in on the city, it was the mayor and council made that decision. Planning commission had nothing to do with it. So what's changed that we're looking into this?
In the ordinance, as I read it, that this has to come, it requires site plan approval, and that's done by the planning commission. There's nothing in here that says anything about the mayor and council approving this or overriding a planning commission or anything like that. I mean, now if this was a license agreement or something that was legally required for the mayor and council to pass, that would be the case. But as I read the code, the city has to follow their own rules.
Yeah, we've had some stuff come in front of us from the city before. I'm sure the city mayor and council would have some method of overriding our decision if we went off the deep end on something. But I think that this, I mean, we're sort of the direct voice of the public, and I think it probably is a smart thing for something like this to pass in front of us. To kind of keep everything on the up and up and clean. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're right. There have been many other projects that just went straight through. It never came in this room for us. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have some basic questions too, along the vein of why is this before us today. Tim mentioned a number of things that were missing from the application. Many of the things that he mentioned are required of the application before the application is even presented to the Planning Commission. That includes architectural drawings that are required under Section 155-16, grading plans that are required under 155-18B, signage under 155-17, a landscape plan under Sections 102-3, critical area commission comments and floodplain under 155-22. And all these are not discretionary. They're not maybe submit them later after the commission reviews them. They are must or shall be submitted to the commission with the application. And what we have to hear today is really, I consider, totally inadequate. There's really no basis to review anything here. It's very, very shallow. And I would suggest that this matter be deferred until we get the required information. Some of the stuff is, there's a huge drop-off where this new addition is being proposed behind the building. It's where the loading dock is. It goes atop the old decoy shed. I was there yesterday, by the way. It's a wonderful place. It's a huge asset and very unique to Havre de Grace. But they even show the old decoy shed within the museum. They have a model of that within the museum. I think parking is definitely an issue unless we see floor plans and what the new addition is going to contain. There's no way to evaluate that. How the buildings and site are accessible, and how the new addition interfaces. This is, as I read in our comprehensive plan workup, this is a city park that it sits in. How does this new addition relate to the city park? How does it relate to the neighbors? We don't know because we don't see architectural drawings. So there's really very little for us to work with here tonight. And I'm disappointed that we have such a thin application before us.
Your response?
I noted in the staff report that we are missing those items. We could definitely come back. I know that this project is being, it's being worked on a volunteer basis, is my understanding. So I'm not saying that that's not a reason that they're, that any of these things are being excused, because they are mentioned in the staff report as recommendations and conditions of the next step. I did mention to the applicant before this, might be an issue, and he had some things he said that he would mention or discuss, so I don't want to speak for the applicant. I spoke to Dudley just right before we started, and he mentioned that the application was incomplete, and he said that he would discuss these items.
But it's still a good point that even though we can discuss some of these items, that we don't have the hard data that's required, you know.
I agree.
And how you heard this recitation of the things that are missing. How difficult is it to produce those things?
Yeah, I don't produce those. I mean, we look at those things and we get them to you, but in this case, you know, that's not anything that we put together in the Department of Planning.
I know you don't prepare them, but you receive them, right? Somebody prepares them, right?
Yeah, I think the applicant will be here, can speak for himself on that, on those matters,
Okay.
on why they weren't included in the application.
Before he speaks, what is going to happen to the existing decor shop? Is it going to be moved back?
We haven't received any of that information.
Okay, you don't know what's going to happen there.
We don't know what's in the building. We haven't received floor plans or what's going to happen with that existing building.
Well, perhaps we'll turn to the applicant and see what he has to say.
Thank you.
Sir, if you could give us your name and your address, and then you're on.
Certainly. Good evening, Chairman Ford, members of the Planning Commission, city staff, and citizens. My name is Dudley Campbell. I'm the managing member of Bay State Land Services. As you're well, many of my people have been before you for projects within the city. With me tonight is Mr. Michael Tarquini, who is president of the board for the Decoy Museum. And what we have here is a project that has started way back under differing city staff. We started back in the spring of '22. And we realize that we have need to do a lot of follow-up work for what we're doing. Please remember, though, it's city land, okay? You're still going to sign off. When I say you, the city still has to sign off on all this because you are the owners. What I want to do tonight, in conversations with Mr. Gamatoria, is to present an overview of the project. If we need to come back for the Planning Commission, we can, but it doesn't fit nicely into your little box of 6 pages of site plan reforms, okay? It is something very unique and obviously a great addition to what we already have existing there. So with that, what I would like to do is very quickly go over some of the reasons why a lot of these manufactured calculations are done. Number one, it is a volunteer. I think that's the first thing we need to know. It's a nonprofit, it's a volunteer organization. I am volunteering my time tonight, as I did with the Hilton Memorial, as I did with Farmerstown, okay, because I think it's a worthwhile addition to the city. It comes down to economics. And so that we all understand this, many of us having doing this for so long, to come in with architectural plans is probably going to be in the neighborhood of, for the first blush, of $25,000 to $30,000. Now, you own the land, and you could very well say we could go out and spend that, but here again, when we get here, you could say no. So we're looking for some type of confidence to be able to move forward with the project. Here again, parking was brought up by Board Member Place. That's something that all the projects we do in the city of Havre Grace, where it's something that needs to be worked out. As far as stormwater management, we're under the 5,000 square foot threshold. The 5,000 square foot is anything above 5,000 square feet requires us to do formal stormwater management plans. This is behind that. As far as critical area goes, the footprint in itself is 4,716 feet. That's the building footprint. Allow Mr. Tarquini, after I speak, to come in and give you a brief overview of what his vision is for the county. But I think what's really key to this whole point is we're putting it in a parking lot, we have a loading zone, we're going to do that area, but we're only adding 139 square feet of impervious area, which from an environmental standpoint is minimal. Now, we understand there's a lot of other places we need to go and things that challenges that we're going to have as a city, and we'll embrace them with you, and we'll get it done. But I think what we're doing is looking, when I say we, I'm speaking from Mr. Tarquini, and the board, and the members of the Decoy Museum, looking for a positive sign from the Planning Commission that we can move forward. And then I will gladly work with city staff from an engineering standpoint to answer all the questions that we have to have. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Tarquini. He'll go into what his vision is for the building itself and why we're going.
Thank you, sir. Your name and address, please.
Mike Tarquini, 608 Lafayette Street, Havre de Grace. Thank you, Chairman Ford and members of the Planning Commission for taking the time to listen to this. The purpose, somebody asked for the purpose. This has been going on a very long time, so the purpose of this is not to move the Mitchell shop. The Mitchell shop is actually driving this whole effort in that it was moved in 1989 to the site of the Decoy Museum. It has significantly deteriorated from the weather, pressures from the weather since that day. You know, the history of waterfowling and decoy making in this area is very, very well established and very prominent. And if something were to happen to Madison's shop, and he was the guy that made it all famous. He wasn't the first one in town, but he was the guy that made it famous. We're throwing good money after bad by just continuing to put Band-Aids on that old building. So our intention is to take the building over, expand, and encapsulate it. It will now come out of the weather. Okay, and then it'll become an inside exhibit. And then the additional square footage that's required just to bridge over to it will be used for more exhibits and things of the like. What other questions? Because I had answers to all the questions that you guys were asking, and I just didn't want to interrupt. But,
Well, to me, it looked like that your proposed addition was covering half of the decoy shop. Are you going to move the shop into the building structure, or what?
yes, the building, when you look at the building from outside, to answer the questions that came up about what is it going to look like, it's going to look like the building that's there now. We actually we had an architect throw out a plan a while back, and we rejected that because it looked grossly different than the building that's there. So we're going, as architecturally exciting as the building is now, the addition will match it because we don't want to create an eyesore or a different look. So the parking situation we discussed with the City of Havre de Grace probably in meeting number 1. And the answer we got was the field behind the museum is fine. And I said, well, it's not paved and it's not marked, just like everybody said. And I was told not to worry. Okay, not my fight. So, and it is correct, we have 9 parking places out front. So, on the architectural, the reason why we did not come, we were also advised that we didn't have to come with the architectural drawings tonight. And the reason why is because City of Havre de Grace actually funds the Decoy Museum in a way. And so I would probably need 2 times their annual funding to go get a set of drawings that may never get approved. And then I have to go spend it again. And I just don't have that kind of budget. So what we wanted to do is you have to get in this vicious circle somehow, right? So we just want to get a footprint approved, and then we go and hire an architect, which we already hired one, but we then turn him loose, and then we realize that before it's all over, we have to bring those in for a permit approval, right? So you're going to see it. There's nothing else being planned for that addition except for exhibit space, and it bridges over to the Mitchell shop, which will then go around the Mitchell shop, put a roof over it, end of story. That's all we're intending to do. We're not putting a banquet hall in. We're not putting anything out of the ordinary. It's just more museum space.
I think where we're confused is looking at this proposed plat, site plan. It looks like that your proposed addition, which is in yellow, is sitting half over the existing decoy shop. but not entirely over it. In other words, the shop is half under the addition and half outside of the addition, and the existing decoy shed is even, or whatever that shed is even beyond that.
Yeah, the shed goes away in this project.
Okay, so that just disappears.
Somebody mentioned the I don't know what it was, an old coal storage
But-
plant, or the lower thing, between the building and the Mitchell shop, there's that dug-in area. That will become the new storage area with a garage door.
But I think you just mentioned in your presentation that, that you would extend this addition over to cover
Well,
the decoy shop, but it's
what
not
we-
shown.
What we have discussed with our architect and a potential builder in this project is, when our forefathers brought that Mitchell shop to the site, they poured some piers to the footer line, but they did not pour a foundation underneath of it. So that shop has to be decoupled, picked up, and moved out of the way. Likewise, the upstairs of it was Mr. Mitchell's Hearst garage, which looks like there's two garage doors. The paint shop is upstairs. That would more than likely be decoupled and moved out of the way. Once you have to pick it up and move it out of the way, now you can bring it closer to the museum.
Okay, well,
And that's why your drawing shows what.
when we consider a site plan, we consider the exact square footage and location of the building that you propose to build. And is this yellow outline, this yellow building, is that the precise location and size of that building?
That's my understanding. Yes.
That's,
And I'm not
I
an
hope that's a
engineer.
fair enough question, but
Billy, you wanna-
if both of you would like to speak together, you're welcome to.
Chairman, it's a very fair question, but as we're so early in this process, we know that there are going to be revisions and changes to it. The intent was to take the missile shop and incorporate it in the new addition being put there, okay? Now, when we get to the architecture,
When you talk.
thank you. But once we get the architecturals, I envision coming back with the architecturals. What essentially we're looking for tonight, and speaking for the Decoy Museum board members, is a preliminary okay with the addition on city land. If we want to come back, I would suggest for us to come back to the city with the architecturals, then we can discuss the stormwater management, all the plans. But I think what we're doing is, before we do a large investment on land that we do not own, that we need some type of direction from the Planning Commission, whether we're going to be able to proceed down this path.
So it sounds like you're seeking tonight a concept approval. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because when we actually do a formal site plan approval, the most fundamental thing that we have to see before us is the position of the building and the size, because that then governs a lot of other things that we have to consider. And, you know, access on private property, parking, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I don't believe it's the duty of this commission to weigh in on architecture per se. In other words, I don't think it's, to my knowledge, we've never sat here and approved the style of a building or how it's going to look once it's built and that sort of thing. What color they're going to paint it and all those things. The things that we're interested in is the size of the building, its function, and all the things on the site that has to support that building. And that's what we're after, not the pure architecture of the building. Because one man's beautiful building is another man's ugly building or lady. And, you know, that's something we don't get into.
Correct.
Yeah.
When we talk about architectural plans, we're not so much concerned with the outside view. We're looking more as
Right.
related related to a fixture count, handicap accessibility, where the landscaping would go, where all the stormwater management go. But understand that what we have initially done as far as architecturally, that footprint will only be 4,700 square feet. That's the footprint. Now, please understand, it'll probably be 3 stories high.
Questions?
A couple of questions. One, the current overhang at the back of the building, you're saying will become enclosed garage door access storage area, that's the plan?
There's like a little cut-in back there that you could back a truck in.
Yeah,
We're gonna our intent is to match up elevations on the flooring. When we do that, that makes, that gives you 8 or 9 feet of
Right.
clearance above
Yes.
that. And our goal would be to then bring the steel down, make that the storage, do away with that shed altogether, and then we'll take the building over as far as we can, and then we'll determine, can the Mitchell shop be brought underneath what we can build?
and second question, have you discussed use of the plain, I'll call it, the grassy area as parking for special events?
The previous administrations, yes.
Yes?
We were told not to worry.
Oh, okay.
That's always dangerous. That's what we were told.
Well, it certainly is, when you're discussing parking in downtown Havre, it seems like it's worth asking the question. Lastly, would it satisfy your purposes if the planning commission gave you a indication of a support, but placed its formal action until the other requisite pieces were provided?
We're gonna have to.
Let me see if I can sharpen that up a little bit.
Oh, thanks.
Make it fit the requirements of the city. That's what I'm trying to say. You express yourself nicely. I'm just talking about trying to make it tie in with what we're required to do. We can't give a final approval on something like this until we have all the information, including all the information that was cited a few minutes ago. And that would be the duty of the planning department to gather that information and put it in a package that we can see, and absorb. And it'll be your duty to make sure they get that stuff, because they're not going to be, creating it out of thin air. They have to get it from somewhere. And I think as certainly as far as the concept is concerned, we've had other people come in front of this commission and ask for. They weren't seeking final approval, but they were seeking our opinion of what we thought of the project and any advice that we gave them and so forth and so on. And we've done that in the past, but we've made it very clear that that we could certainly change our minds on certain things based on new information that's put in front of us. It would seem to me that there's certainly plenty of land available to do what you need to do and to meet requirements. Would you express an opinion on that?
There's 5 acres of land, and they're looking for a 4,000 square foot expansion that's already over a pervious area. So yeah, like, in that basic sense, it works.
In other words, by giving you an idea of what we conceptually think of this, we're not causing you to move into a trap, where you come back later and find out you just can't do it because of A, B, or C. Mm-hmm. So the number one consideration is land, and the number two consideration is parking. It's easy to plop a building down It's all the stuff that goes on around it that causes the problems in a lot of projects. So, how would you recommend that we proceed based on what they're requesting?
Yeah, I agree that I don't think that any official approval can go on tonight. I think, if they're looking for an approximate 4,200 square building that will go off of the back of their building, we know generally what the impacts will be just by the small increase of impervious space. So I think if there's any general advice that anybody here wanted to give, so maybe they could incorporate that into the additional submissions that they have to give, if there's even enough information here for that. I would recommend that, but otherwise, yeah, I think what you're saying, Chairman, is that is correct. I mean, that the best we can do is say, hey, you have the land, and I think the idea you have will work in some way, but we need more information.
It's always a conundrum when you're trying to not put the cart before the horse, and at the same time, you're trying to not invest a huge sum of money and all of a sudden have the whole project fly in your face after you've put down all that kind of money. So I can certainly understand your plight, particularly when you're dealing with city funds and volunteer funds and donated funds and donated services. It can be tough. Would it be fair to say that that this yellow shape that you've drawn on this site plan would be the size of your proposed building? Do you think it could possibly be bigger, or you think you can be held to that footprint?
Preliminarily, that reflects what we have done preliminarily from an architectural standpoint. Okay, so that's the size. Our goal is to keep it under 5,000 square feet, so then we don't have to do stormwater management. And Chairman, you articulated perfectly what we're looking for, is that we just want to we understand what the concerns are of the Planning Commission, and we'll go back to the drawing boards and do it. So I think what we're doing is saying, point us in the direction that we're heading in the right direction, but we need these items, A, B, C, and D, to do a final approval.
Well, the city's the owner.
Correct.
And I'm sure that when a push comes to shove, the city will be able to come up with the necessary solutions to make the site plan work. Is that fair to say?
It is, Chairman.
How do you feel about that?
I think that makes sense to me. I think we can all sit down and sit with Public Works and permitting staff and Mr. Gamatoria, and we can figure all this out.
Do you heard the recitation of missing documents that Mr. Place read out? Do you see any reason why any of those cannot be produced?
Unless it was a financial reason, no.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I had just a couple, sorry, Ed, did you want to say something?
Well, I would say, is it fair to say that from what we've seen tonight or so far, are there any glaring issues that could become a problem?
That's a great question, and I'll start with you, sir. Tim, do you see anything that could arise that could be a problem, a roadblock?
I mean, there are potential curveballs. I mean, if what the applicant is saying tonight is correct, then I wouldn't see any. But if the space was used as an event space, I mean, much more parking would be required. It'd be a big impact if there was some really odd architecture that was put in. It could have an impact on the neighborhood, but also just the way that the gutters and things would come off of the roof. I mean, I would think that everything would be put together in a way that makes sense. I think they know the site. I think overall the footprint of the building isn't going to create a huge impact, but without the floor plans and architectural elevations and some of those other things, we just have to be sure. But I don't think, nothing out of the ordinary is being asked for.
Well, the floor plan is just going to yield a square footage that's going to set up, that's going to drive certain requirements
Yep.
per square foot.
And
And-
parking requirements, yeah, all that sort
Yeah.
of thing, yep.
And if the floor plan ended up being slightly larger, you just have to meet the requirements slightly more.
You're right, correct.
That's, but it seems to me that you've certainly got the land to do that. You're not constrained. And land constraint is the biggest killer of all for projects. And that's, you know, it invariably can just totally throttle a project because it's just not enough room to meet all the requirements. And it seems like we're in good shape here. Now, with all these different public facilities and that are on this huge tract of land that's contiguous, reaching all the way over to the Lighthouse Park and all the way down to the city marina and everywhere else, you know, the land kind of becomes fungible at that point. You know, which square foot belongs to which amenity.
It is a the parking there is a symbiotic relationship
Yeah.
between all of the facilities.
But the nice thing about it is you don't have a full-blown event going on at every single place at the same time. So it's kind of like becomes a shared parking.
Yeah, the department didn't mention parking as being an issue after we looked at it, so.
The last thing in the world we want is the neighbors complaining because they're parked up, you know. That would be, I guess, our single biggest concern, or my single biggest concern. Comments from anybody else here?
Tammy wants to talk.
Yes.
I would say that the parking from different events, I've attended at the Decoy Museum and events that are connected to the lighthouse, that shared grass area, it goes over well. And I think that parking will not be an issue. You know, I know that you have area in front of the building, which I'm sure that you will be ADA approved and have handicap parking still there and enough spots for visitors as they come in. So I think it's a great idea that you want to move the existing decoy shop into a covered area. That way it will be something that can be usable year-round, and when people come to visit, I think it's a great idea. So I like the way, the direction you're going in, and I hope that you're able to come together with a plan so we can further discuss it.
Thank you.
I didn't mention this, I don't know if it's worthwhile mentioning, but the city mayor and the city council have already signed an easement for the proposed building for 20 years with the Maryland Historical Trust in order for us to apply for a grant, which we got. But the longer we do all this preliminary stuff, we may have to give that money back because we won't be able to spend it. And we have to do it by a certain date. And we've lost a lot of time at the front end of this thing. If we lose more, then we have to give it back. But it's
Well,
a couple $100,000. So.
you don't want to do that.
But we're not going to have a choice if we carry on forever.
We are, as a commission, we're prepared to meet quickly. Again, it's absolutely as soon as. I for one don't see the need to have final architecturals. I just need, for myself, I'm speaking strictly for myself as one commissioner, I just need to see a square foot expression that would be the target square footage that we would be basing our decision on.
And Chairman, you're right, correct. That is your vision of what we need to do. But as Tim has related to, as board member, planning commission member, Mr. Place has, we have downspouts, we have ADA. All that has to be done in final architectural plans to be able to get the grades and everything perfect.
And those things get approved by other people than us. They have to run the gauntlet.
You
Mr. Chairman.
anticipate meeting them, right?
I'm sorry?
You anticipate meeting all these requirements?
I have to.
You have to, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, let me just suggest that the applicant comply with the requirements of the code in terms of the architecture. And just in the architecture alone, it's elevations that include colored renderings, elevations for each side of the building, windows and associated trim, exterior materials, pictures of roofs, location of HVAC equipment, which is practicality but good. In this case, you know, you're taking away your loading dock. I would suggest you'd want to be able to articulate how that, well, all right, I'm sorry. Okay, well then, a plan would clarify that. So my recommendation is do hire an architect. You're going to be spending money on this building anyway. You're going to have to hire an architect anyway. Take it through schematic design. That's pretty much what's identified, you know, what's the outline that's required in the code. And then when you bring it back, you'll have a complete application that this commission can review more thoroughly. The kind of things I'd be interested in, you know, particularly is, as I said before, I think the appearance of the building is important, and how it relates to the neighbors, how it relates to the rest of the park. Right now, it's definitely the back of the house. Is there some way you can make it more compatible, more friendly with the rest of the park? Those are the kind of things you might look to your architect to. And one thing I would just say more broadly, and it's not on you guys at all, but just in walking around the site, you know, you have, and since it is city property too, by the way, and since it's city property, we should be working at the highest standards, not trying to get by. But because you have the Maritime Museum over there, you have this museum, as a tourist, and I'm fairly new to town, but as a tourist, it's very hard to find your way into these places, into your museum, into the Maritime Museum. But once you get up there, you realize they're right next to each other. They're very close. And you talk about parking and all that. It would be great if there was more of a master plan for this site. And again, it's not on you guys, it's more on the city. A master plan that really tied these two uses together and created a real inviting public space there. That would be the real dream scenario. I think it would make your place much more viable and useful. It would be great for the Maritime Museum too. But at minimum, you really have to do what's required under the code and show us those schematic architectural drawings. And the others, the grading and everything else.
Any other comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a comment. Tim, somewhere in the city hall, there is a plan for the Havre de Grace Cultural District. The Havre de Grace Cultural District starts at Market Street and goes to the river and goes down to Revolution Street. All these things with the museums were all worked out, all the plans. There's a reason that there's no parking there, because they wanted to preserve the green spaces, and there's plenty of on-street parking for whatever event wants to go on down in that area. That's why there's no paved parking lot down at the Concord Point Park, because there's plenty of on-street parking. I'm still gonna say, this is the city property. The city has the right to decide what they can do with the property. They're working with the museum, they're working with the Maritime Museum, they're working with the people that run the lighthouse to what goes in there. And there's also, in that plan, there's supposed to be a building built up on the corner of Market and Lafayette Street that kind of ties into that whole area down there. And now we've added the Moore family household and the garden in the back there. So they're a little bit out of the cultural district, and I never knew I lived near the cultural district when I grew up here in Havre de Grace, but it was actually across the street from my house.
Well, you are the culture.
Yeah, you are the culture.
That's why I asked the question the first time. This is not our purview to decide what the city can put on their property.
Yeah, it's not mine either. I can't make that decision. So we follow the rules in the department. They come here.
Well,
If that's a vote that you guys take, then that's something that you guys take.
let me, before we wind this thing up, and we need to conclude it, I do have to ask, thank you so much for your presentation. I do have to ask, are there any citizens here that wish to speak to this particular issue? Okay, hearing none. All right. Now, so we've I assume we've decided that we, as a group, that we're not going to act on this site plan tonight. That we're gonna, we've already made verbal recommendations to them. Anybody else have any additional recommendations you want to make to them?
Yeah, I'll make a recommendation that we approve what they're asking for and put it back in the city council's, seat, since this is all city property, and they can decide what they want to do with their property. We can't decide what goes on in city property.
So that's a motion, you're moving that we approve this thing as presented tonight?
I'll move that we support it.
Okay,
We don't have to approve it or disapprove it. We'll just approve it and turn it back over to the mayor and city council and go from there.
so is your motion, I mean, supporting something that's pretty loosey-goosey. It would seem to me that what you're asking for is that we basically just refuse to hear this case, and other than to give it support. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Mr. Ford, I think conceptually, I mean, I find it to be okay. I think we can approve the concept, provided the details come back to us, and we do a thorough review later on, and then approve it completely.
Well, let's
officially.
start, you started with a motion.
So we need a second.
But do me a favor and restate your motion.
I said, I would recommend that the planning commission support this concept plan and send it back to the city council for further approval.
Do I hear a second on that motion?
I would second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion, please.
So I think if I understand you correctly, you're agreeing with the fact that we're approving the concept? Correct?
Yeah, this is part of a plan that goes back years. And, this is part of a plan that goes back years. And there was all kinds of discussions in the past about why there's no parking there and what can be built. At one time, the Decoy Museum, they had the whole top of that parcel of land, and then the Maritime Museum moved in there, and then they got a chunk of the land. But originally, the lease agreement was all that property went to the Decoy Museum. But then the city comes back and says, well, we're gonna put the stormwater management pond in here or fixture, but there's still parking down there. They still, when there's an event, they have little paths that they can drive vehicles on to get across to the other side.
Mr. Chairman, I would oppose Jim's motion. This is a site plan application. Any application, whether it's the city, in this case, it's actually a private applicant coming before us with a site plan application on city property, it still comes before the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is the body designated by the city code, by the state, to hear site plan applications and to review site plan applications. So there's nobody to defer this to. We are the organization that is responsible for reviewing, approving, or denying site plan applications.
I would agree with that analysis. I believe that that according to our code, we are required to treat this the same as if it were being brought by a private citizen. The city, by the way it structured its code, has put itself in the same camp as private citizens, even though it has other ways of legislating around certain things.
I like the concept, the initial concept of supporting the program. However, I think that perhaps a solution might be to amend the motion to add to it certain things that comply that allow us to comply with our expectations as a planning commission, or our requirements as a planning commission. So that would be my humble suggestion to my.
Well, one way would be to amend the motion, the other way would be to put it to a vote and then get a new motion. Either, we can do it either way.
I would recommend that we put it to a vote and hear a different motion, if we want to.
Did you have a comment?
Can't do that. You can only bring the subject up one time at one meeting. Robert Rules of Order.
They are a 503C nonprofit organization on city property. I think that we already support them and that we should consider helping them get through the process instead of denying them. They come to us today to say, this is our plan. We want, your approval to say, okay, should we go forward? Should we go on and hire an architecture and go and pay all the money and the funds to get the paperwork we need to get this approved? And yes, I do believe that council and the mayor should get involved. Planning Commission, we're step one, and I know that we have our duties, but it is city property, and I think that it's not in the hands of just the Planning Commission. It's in the hands of the citizens as well as the city council and the mayor. So,
So do you support the motion?
yes, I do.
Okay.
Is not the planning department still going to be required to give various approvals as each one of these steps are taken in the future?
Yeah, all the things that require engineering approval, for instance, things like that, still have to be, those requirements still have to be
And the
met.
applicant seems to feel confident that they are going to meet all those requirements as they go on.
Right.
I have not heard a reason why, or a reason that this, doesn't look like something that would be good for the city or good for that property. So I think that we're kind of a preliminary step. The final steps need to be approved by the department, the planning department, as they are produced, but the concept I see as being favorable and worthy of approval.
I agree myself, but the motion before us is to support the concept and then wash our hands of any further approval in this process. That's the motion.
That's a bad precedent.
Consideration that time is of the essence. They have grant money that will expire if they don't expend it. So,
That's right.
time is of the essence. And so in order for us to for them to give us what we feel we need as our responsibility, we need to give them a strong enough support in order for them to use those funds and not incur expenses.
But the motion is,
I understand.
Yeah,
Support unconditionally.
we've got a motion on the floor, so we can't hear from you right now.
I think that's why I was seeking clarification on the wording you had. I mean, I think we're essentially agreeing to support them and approve the concept, provided the details come back to us later.
That's not the motion, though.
That's
I
not the
know
motion.
that's what I'm trying to clarify.
I would think the details would come back to the planning department later.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean,
And,
yeah,
no, and the planning commission, though. That's how it works.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve the concept as presented, and, or that we support the concept, I believe is the term you used. And it's also been moved that we then turn the whole matter over to the city, mayor and city council, to make further decisions and that, in essence, this would not come back before us again.
Well, that would be up to them to send it back to us.
Oh, come on now.
Okay, in other words, you're stating that you think the mayor and city council would likely
That's their
do what they
decision.
need to do and then they remand it back to us for site plan
That
approval?
would be up to them. What I'm saying is, this is a city project on city property
Yeah,
that the planning commission has no authority over what the city does with their property. You know, when the guy put the deck down on Congress and Washington Street on city property, Planning Commission didn't approve that. When they put the pickleball courts out at down at the park, Planning Commission didn't approve that.
Mr. Chair, may I make the,
none of those things fall under Chapter 155 that you had mentioned. So this one specifically falls under, because it's the expansion of a non-residential building more than 20%. But we wouldn't review any decks as part of the Planning Commission, or we wouldn't review pickleball courts in the park, although that would get reviewed by the city engineer, but none of those things fall under Chapter 155.
Well, how about the fence on the,
Fences don't come in front of the Planning Commission.
Mr. Chair, may I make the obvious point that this matter has already been referred to us from the city? Mr. Gamatoria is a signature on the application. It was referred to us by the planning department. So the ball is squarely in our court, as it should be. And there's no referring it back to the city council. This is our job.
sure there is.
I'd like to move to amend the motion. Can you all please speak into the microphone? Oh, sorry, Diane. I'd like to move to amend the motion. The core remaining in place, that we support it. I think that is consensus. But that we amend it to require that the applicant bring to us comply with the normal requirements of, as described in city charter, of those things that are required for planning commission action. I'd like to amend your motion. I'd like to move that amendment. Now, that would require a second.
I'll second it.
Oh, okay.
There you
Well,
go.
you could say I'll adapt it to my motion. But, and
Okay, now we got a new amended motion we'll have to vote on.
We'll vote on the amendment first.
Yep.
All in favor of the amendment?
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not quite clear. So we are no longer suggesting that we refer this back to the city. The amendment is that we support in concept this application on the condition that the applicants provide all the documentation that's required in the city code and back to this commission for approval.
yes, that would be the intent. That's the intent. That's what we're supposed to do anyway.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what we're
it
saying.
allows
That's what
us
I've been
to.
saying.
And you're seconding that.
Yeah, I'm seconding that.
Discussion on that?
Yeah, I'm seconding that. Sorry, I wasn't listening on the thing here.
All right.
So before we go further with that, Tim, Mr. Boissier, Planning Director of Havre de Grace, is it meant for us to present this back to the City Council and the citizens?
That's not required under code for site plan review.
Okay.
Generally, how this would work is the city would approve of what's built on their property. They have a lease with the Decoy Museum, so they would already have some agreement. Yeah, we're okay with what you're doing, or else we wouldn't be to this point. And then there's the approval process. So because this falls under one of the 5 criteria that goes under site plan review, it comes to this council. However, you're part of the planning committee. If you wanted to go back to Council President Ringsocker and Jason Robertson and discuss these things, and you wanted more input from the mayor and council on what the building should look like and that sort of thing, that's entirely up to you. But from this point, there isn't another statutory level of approval by the city council, by mayor and city council.
Well, essentially, thank you, Tim. Essentially, I just want to make sure that we're not holding up the process by sending it back and forth. I know these gentlemen need to move forward to get approval so they can get the permits through the planning department. So, you know,
We can fast track this right away as soon as we get the other materials, and if if it needs to move that fast, depending on when the submittal is and the planning commission is up for it, we could even have a special meeting to review this.
Do they have to have architectural design, or do they just need the plat level
Yeah.
layout?
As Mr. Place had said, our architectural design guidelines are required as part of site plan review, because we have to review materials. So, for instance, on certain facades, you can't have the, I'm not sure what it's called off the top of my head, but you can't have the sort of fake brick layer. You have to use real brick in certain areas. It was something we dealt with Popeyes. So on the area that fronts Pulaski Highway, they're using real brick now, and they're using that facade, the brick, the kind of unauthentic brick facade on the
faux-
non-visual side. Yep.
Okay, faux brick. Okay. Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion on the amended motion? So I'm going to call for a vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, the amendment passes. Now we go back and vote on the original motion. Is that right, or
That's amended.
As amended.
as amended? All right. I'd like to vote on the original motion
As amended.
as amended.
Aye.
Any opposed? There we are. Now, we're done. I think that what we've given you is, I hope you've heard that we've given you great encouragement, and that we, in general, we're pleased with the site plan with details to be worked out. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yes.
And I will speak for the commission, we are ready to act again as quickly as you can assemble the things we need to act. And you and I can have a discussion later about the details of those things.
Sounds
But
good.
I want to make sure that we've met the requirements of our
Okay,
ordinance.
great.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I just have a quick question, but they're walking away.
Okay, the second item on the agenda tonight,
Do you know?
get all this noise out of the way.
That's important.
Dog holds the grant. That would have been a good question.
And I believe this is what you've requested is a discussion. We're not actually voting on any particular thing. There's not a matter that's being brought to us for a final vote or anything like that.
No, this discussion is coming from a matter, but we're not asking for any approval of anything. We're not asking for necessarily a legal interpretation of a situation, but there is a situation that occurred that brought up this discussion tonight. Hopefully, it won't be super long. It doesn't affect a lot of properties in town, but it is potentially an issue, and the zoning code's unclear on it.
Okay, so this whole thing arose out of a request or a potential request or a feeling out. What is this?
Yeah, we had a resident file for a fence permit, and when we looked at the code I can go into it, but when we looked at the code, we couldn't make a decision on what the intention of the code was. So since I provided you with some of the information last week, the city attorney has given a ruling on her interpretation of the code, so I can provide part of that discussion tonight, because it kind of tells you all what we have to do now under the code. And then if you decide to change that for future applicants or just to clarify something, then we can do that as part of this.
Well, the material that you sent us made it, I think, abundantly clear that there's some gray area in our code.
Right.
The water's a little bit muddy, so to speak.
Right.
Kind of like the back channel sometimes. and that to be fair to the neighborhood, the citizenry, and to try to hold true to precedents, going forward, that we need to kind of do two things tonight. It seems to me that, correct me if I'm mistaken, but it seems to me that we need to weigh in to some degree with some opinion regarding this particular case that you're faced with, without making a decision, but I mean just basically giving our general impressions and so forth, to give you some sort of guidance. And then secondly, to perhaps make some recommendations to the mayor and city council to clean up the ordinance, to make it easier and more acceptable, to particularly the people in the R1 district. I will open the discussion with, I went down there yesterday and I circled that block so many times that I thought some neighbor was going to wonder and call the police on me or something, because I just kept going around and around. And what I was basically trying to do is I was trying to get a feel for what logically would be a front yard and what would be a backyard. And as I did all that, I started putting arrows on this aerial photograph. And the arrows just were my impression of which way those houses actually faced. And the second thing that I discovered was that it seems to me it's grossly unfair to any property owner to tell them they've got 2 front yards. I mean, that makes no sense. I mean, that's just, and the reason I say that, yes, you could design a house that looks the same on both sides. And you could actually, do that intentionally so that it's, no matter which way you come at that house, you think you're coming to a magnificent home. But we've got so many other things that attach themselves to what we call a front yard and what we call a backyard. Everything from setbacks to fencing to you name it, So because of that, if we tell any property owner that they've got 2 front yards, we've basically constrained them ridiculously against doing certain things that they may wish to do. Where are they going to put all the yard sheds and everything else? Where are they going to put their fences? Just on the sides?
That was our question, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't make sense. So to me, I hope I might sound like I'm just giving a speech here, but to me, we need to come up with a policy of establishing front yard, backyard. Even if we have to go
One front yard.
Yeah. Establishing a front
front
yard
yard.
and a backyard. That's what I'm trying to say. And not have 2 front yards.
Correct.
And in keeping with that, we got that nice other thing from you. Let's see here. Oh, the one where you went in and you basically indicated all the through lots in that whole district.
Yeah, we had our GIS person do that, and part of that's a mistake. I wouldn't say it's a mistake. Part of it is also some of the confusion with the rules, because in the city, in a lot of places, we don't differentiate between streets, avenues, alleys, and lanes.
That's where I'm getting ready to go with that right now.
So as I spoke to Diane, she was saying that at some point the city had rebranded some alleys as lanes. So the original GIS looked at lanes as a street, because sometimes our code does that. So in some of those situations, obviously if you back up into an alley or a lane in this case, I think it's pretty obvious that that's your rear yard.
We've got some very broad streets. Lewis Lane is a great example. It's a perfectly broad street that's called a lane. And
That's what it was. Huh? That's what it was originally.
well, I'm sure everything in the city was a lane.
Nelson Lewis's farm.
Yeah.
Up on the hill.
Yeah, and you mean the part across the tracks up there. So anyway, the first statement that I would make is that we should never, ever, ever treat a property that faces one side on a street and the other side on a converted alley. We should never call that a through lot, ever. Because those alleys that whose names they put lipstick on the pig by renaming them lanes, and they even went so far as to pave them. I think a lot of them got paved in the 80s and 90s, correct? Yep. During the Hersh administration. But those very narrow lanes were service lanes. They were meant to be a service lane. They were meant for just the horse-drawn garbage wagon and the milk wagon that come up through there and not be seen on the main streets and stuff. Those should never be called through lots. And even if we have to change the ordinance to clarify that and state that, how would you put that into an ordinance? The way I would do it is I would define those kind of lanes by their width. I would say any public way that's whose right of way is less than X number of feet, and define it that way. Don't define it by the name lane, because you're going to get in trouble if you do that. Define it by the width of the street. And if it's a very narrow public way, then any property that's on that public way, that's a backyard. That's a rear lot. And that would clean up most of this map you just drew.
Agreed.
All right? And then the second solution I see is to take the true through lots, that is the ones that face on a nice broad street on both sides. And
Commerce and Giles Street.
you're almost going to have to go in there and do a survey of every house that's affected and assign a front yard and a backyard to the house administratively, even though all these houses already exist. And the front and the back of that house, it might be anybody's call as to whether that looks like a front of a house or the back of a house, because of its architecture. And then what you would do is notify each of those property owners, there's not very many of them, that you've administratively declared one side to be their front yard and one side to be the backyard. And if they have any problem with that they are to appear in front of the planning commission and we vote on it, so that it's not just one person making that call. And if they don't like the way we vote on it, they can go to the Board of Appeals. And that would put that matter to rest forever for purposes of code enforcement, zoning enforcement. It's just high time we clarify that. We'll go round and round for the next 100 years if we don't do that.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, is it possible that the front of the house is whatever the post office recognizes as the address?
Well, that's one way to do it, but that's not always the best way. In fact, I was looking for mailboxes on a couple of these houses, and I don't know where they get their mail. They must have a P.O. box, because I couldn't find a mailbox.
Maybe their front door.
And I've also saw some of these houses with a house number on both sides of the house, facing in both directions. I think that we need to rather than using something like that, and remember, the post office picks the side they want just for ease of delivery. They don't pick it because it makes sense to our zoning problem. All right, and it doesn't necessarily make sense to their neighbors. So I think we need to ignore what the post office does. And I would take this so far as to look at those waterfront parcels. And customarily in the state of Maryland, people always considered the front of their waterfront home to be the side that faced the water. And I ran into that. I was in the home inspection business for years, and I'd go down and do home inspections down on the Eastern Shore, and I have to express on the report which is the front and which is the back of the house and all that, and I would get corrected all the time. And a lot of those homes, when you look at the house, the front was the magnificent side and the back was the service side, and that's just the way it was. But I really think for our intents and purposes, we should call the side that faces the street the front for purposes of zoning, just for zoning, because that then gives them a much bigger backyard which faces the water to do more stuff with that they wish to do. It doesn't constrain them as much if we declare the street side as the front, even though that might not be the prettiest side of the house. And all these things I'm throwing out here, I want the rest of the commission to weigh in on. I just spent a ton of time thinking about this stuff today. And
I'll add to your comments there.
yeah.
At one time, the city didn't have any zoning, and then in 1982, they put zoning into effect, and there was a thing called a grandfather clause that any parcel that was in existence before zoning was grandfathered in, and technically, the current zoning didn't apply to them. When these things about a corner lot and a front and back lot were the front of the house, they were all added in when we started putting new developments into the city. So the conditions of properties in Bully Rock and the other developments up there, they might have been a corner lot, but those really didn't apply down in the old section of Havre Grace. Now, I grew up here, and when you go out there on the corner, there used to be an attorney named A. Freeborn Brown. He lived in the corner house, and I think there's somebody named Macaulay that lives there now. Well, Mr. Brown's house used to be 2 Chesapeake Drive, because that was the side door. And now I think it has a Commerce Street address. Is that where you're? And the one that you were talking about, I sent you the email the other day. That used to be Dr. Lou's house. And Dr. Lou was one of the big doctors in Havre Grace. Used to have a big Mercedes limousine that he drove around. And in their backyard, which was the Commerce Street side, had a 6 or 8 foot tall fence there. And Dr. Lou's daughter had a swing set in the backyard that would rival what the city put in at Tidings Park. And you know, when I was growing up, you went to Tidings Park, or you went to the elementary school, or you went to the Catholic school over here. That was the only playgrounds that we had back in the 60s. And so I don't know when all these addresses changed around, but the Goldmans were always on Chesapeake Drive. Dr. Lou's house came out on Chesapeake Drive, and the other one. There's a couple oddball parcels of land where you go from Commerce Street to Giles Street, and if you go back and you look at the history of that area, it was called Bloomsbury Manor, and that was like the second rendition of how we were going to divide Havre Grace up after the Hoppers plan, and where they went from little small tiny lots to bigger lots, and you know, that's what we have. We changed the names of alleys to lanes here because it was a kind of like a civil rights case, because the term alley had bad connotations. Lewis Lane was a farm lane that went up to Nelson Lewis's house, which was located right in the middle of Route 40 where Burger King is. And Lewis Lane is actually only a 20-foot wide street or lane. The people that live out there on Anderson Avenue, they gave up 10 feet of their property so the street could be made wider. And then the school property gave up the other half of that. So I think we should go back to this. If you're in the Old Town Havre Grace section, this side of Route 40, you should still have that grandfather clause. And, you know, if somebody wants to put a fence up, they can put a nice fence up. No more chain link fences.
Tim, did you say that you had some kind of a legal interpretation handed down?
We did. So we spoke with the city attorney, and here on this slide, you can see it. So the code goes back and forth between a through lot and a lot with double frontage. It basically means the same thing. So city attorney said the applicant, according to definition, the applicant designates what the front street is on their building permit application. So as of now, anyone who comes into the city on a through lot, they decide what their front yard or their backyard is, according to them on the building permit. The first time an owner designates the front street on a building permit, that remains the front street for the entire time that property exists because of estoppel. The rule of estoppel. Obviously, the rear yard is opposite of the side of the front yard that was declared by the person, and fences are not structures, so they wouldn't have to follow setback rules. So that was what the city attorney had given us this morning.
Well, that's not helping us
It
at
does.
all.
I mean, no. But I mean, again, the planning commission isn't here tonight to approve of a specific fence permit. This is more about a policy decision in the future of, if we go by this rule, then, and I think this is actually the case. My understanding is someone on our staff spoke with a neighbor, and they consider their front yard, we would, I think, normally consider their rear yard. And so up and down that entire street, you could have a front yard with a fence in front of it, and then the house next to it, no front yard.
Yeah, it makes
and
no
then the
sense.
rear yard, they're saying is their front yard, and that's all just based on what the owner says is their front or backyard when they apply for the permit.
That would be
It'd be terrible.
out of control.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it might as well not have it zoning.
Right. So yeah, again, we're not, we didn't want to put, I mean, I don't know, it's not the purview of the planning commission anyway, but we would never want to put you in a spot of a legal interpretation of a specific permit or applicant. But I mean, this is a bigger policy decision that then gets potentially turned into
Well,
some
it's-
ordinance changes and then goes in front of the mayor and council.
The ordinance definitely on this entire topic of front yard, backyard, and on the topic of what constitutes a fence, all that stuff really needs to be
Yeah.
reshaped. And for instance, in the R1 definition, and I'm quoting here, it says accessory structures and fences shall not occupy more than 50% of the entire yard. And then you go to table 1, R1 zone, it says max lot coverage is permitted to be only 40%. And that's the max lot coverage is the house and the outbuildings, accessory structures, but does not include fences. Now, I don't understand what this means by accessory structures and fences shall not occupy more than 50% of the entire yard. That, to me, is it's just a word salad. It doesn't mean anything to me.
You can't put a garage in the front yard and then convert the garage
Well,
to living quarters.
it talks about that in a different part of the ordinance where it won't let you put outbuildings in the front yard, front of the front corner of the house.
But you could technically, because you would declare what your front or rear yard was.
Because what?
You would declare what your front or your rear yard was according to this double frontage rule.
But
So you could, I mean, so this goes beyond fences. I mean, this
Yeah.
goes that you could have a garage in the front yard of one house.
I disagree with the city attorney's ruling. I adamantly disagree with it.
Uh-huh.
Tammy and I decided that whatever part of the house does not have a fence is the front yard. Part of the fence is the backyard.
Now,
But a hedge is a fence also.
Garage.
the other problem I have with fences is that our ordinance currently defines a fence as being, a man-made barrier, which makes sense. And then it goes into the open fence. And then it also includes as a fence a hedge or any other natural growth. And that's where you get into a real sticky situation. Because what's a hedge and what's other growth? And if you plant 3 bushes in a row, have you suddenly created a fence? That would seem to me to be a bit absurd. And if you try to create a hedge, you start out with these cute little shrubs that aren't touching each other, and they sort of grow together. And then you have a height restriction on a fence, but what happens when the growth grows taller than that? What are you going to do? You're going to go over there and
You send Earl over there to.
you're going to send them a citation because their growth got higher than 6 feet? You know, that doesn't make sense. I think that hedges and growth need to be completely removed from the fence definition, and there should be an entirely different paragraph that deals with growth. And number one, that paragraph should state that you can't plant anything within X number of feet of a city boundary right away. Because, and you can get it close, but see, whatever the people plant is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Next thing you know, it's leaning out over top of the sidewalk and blocking the vision of vehicles trying to make a corner turn. They can't see around the darn thing. It gets to be dangerous. And so if you hold the growth back, then it's just a yard bush. You know, so if somebody wants to put a hedge in, that's fine, but you can require them to keep it back, say 3 feet or 5 feet or something from the front property line. And if a hedge is maintained in the front yard, there should be a height restriction on it of no more than 4 feet, so that you don't, you know, so that the neighborhood looks nice, if you will. In this ordinance, currently, fences under 20 inches and hedges are exempt. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. In one place it says hedges are exempt, and in the next place it says a fence is a hedge.
It's a hedge.
You know, which is it? The ordinance does limit fences and hedges to 4 feet in the front yard in height. And it lets you go up to 6 feet on alleys and lanes on corner lots. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, we have a separate definition for corner lots, and then we have a double corner lot thing that we're sort of dealing with. There's a lot going on.
Now, the only thing I haven't, I've been going on and on here, and I wish my fellow commissioners would weigh in on some of this stuff. The only thing I haven't touched yet is the third rail, and that's that particular property. And I have an opinion, but anybody else? Please.
I would say that the owners of the property would want an aesthetically pleasing yard, and they would probably communicate with their neighbors and kind of look comparatively what they have to make it look nice. Who wants to live on a street that's blocked off? You know, you can't access
Ask
the
him about
neighbors,
his neighbor
et cetera.
across the street.
Well, I do think that, you know, we all love Havre de Grace, right? It's beautiful, and, you know, you're going to put in a structure in your yard because you know, maybe you want to have a dog or children play and keep them safe, but you want it to look nice, you know, and I think that, you know, having 2 front yards, essentially, we both have a front yard, side yard, backyard, and the front door is generally, you know, the front of your house, and you access the backyard. That's your area where you want to be with your family, away from, you know, the community. So I think it all comes down to aesthetics, and of course we have to have, you know, legislation and codes, et cetera, in place. But I really think that hearing from the citizens that want to erect a fence, you know, what's your purpose, what's the plan, and how does it look compared to the rest of the neighborhood? Something we should consider.
I'm going to touch the third rail now. In that block that contains the 3 houses, the Goldman house clearly faces the water. Trying to get the street names here.
Chesapeake.
Yeah, it clearly faces Chesapeake Drive, and its backyard is clearly on Commerce Street. It even has a hedge across the backyard on Commerce Street. On the other end of that block, the Macaulay House actually is designed and in fact faces sideways. It faces Stoke Street. And so its backyard is its front yard and its two side yards are on streets, and its backyard is just a backyard. And the backyard butts up against the middle house's yard. And that's very obvious when you go there. So then the property that's the subject of discussion, which is this the Egger property?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
In my opinion, it clearly faces Chesapeake Drive. That's the front. And I base that opinion on the architecture and the way things are structured on the lot and so forth. And that would be in keeping with the Goldman property as well. It would tie the two together, which would make the Commerce Street side their backyard, which means if they were decided to put a fence, that would be where they could erect a fence is along Commerce Street, which would not, I would think, would not be particularly appreciated by the other folks across the street. But you got to have a front yard, you got to have a backyard, and that's what it looks like to me. I don't know if the rest of you have taken the time to go down there and ride around.
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, I rode down there, but the way I feel is what my opinion is doesn't matter, okay?
Say it doesn't matter? Of course it matters.
It's an opinion, okay?
Right, right.
There's no legal basis for it.
Right.
It's a personal preference thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it should be based on something else besides that. It should be, that the existing structure, the address, the way it faces, something solid that is not really open to too much interpretation. Or the legality of how the deed reads or something like that. It should be something besides everyone's opinion. I mean, I would really prefer to hear, citizens' thoughts on that to get an idea of what the citizens are thinking and what, if we're missing something that should come into play or influence a decision about what's the front. I don't think you could have two front yards any more than you could have two left hands. I mean, it's that just doesn't make sense.
Left-handed.
I'm going to call on some citizens to comment in just a moment. But anybody else?
No, I'm good.
You're good.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would just, I think the lanes is obvious, as you pointed out. There's obviously a front yard and a backyard on those, it's Plum Lane, Peach Lane, and there's a main street. So those seem to be no-brainers to me. I'm interested to hear from the citizens too about Chesapeake and how they view it. I'm sure. Did somebody apply to have a fence on Chesapeake? Was that?
No, it was on Commerce.
It was on Commerce. Well,
Chesapeake address on Commerce.
I would tend to agree with you, but Mr. Chairman, but I'd like to hear, because that's what seemed to make sense. There's
We'll do that right
obviously
now.
an open expanse of lawns along Chesapeake, and that seems to be pretty consistent throughout all the houses.
I'm going to invite, I see we have a couple of citizens here. I'm going to invite, let's just go all the way over here. If you would come up and stand in front of the mic and give us your name and your address, and then tell us what you think.
Hi, guys. I know most of you. Chris Stathis, 615 Commerce Street. My property is exactly across the street from the property in question. Yeah, I came here tonight and I was mystified by the concept that something could have 2 front yards and no backyards. So thank you for going on the side of logic on that. I think architecturally the house clearly presents a front door that is a traditional front door in the Chesapeake Bay, on the Chesapeake Drive side. As the people who would be staring at the backyard wants to find, my wife and I have no objections to that being designated the backyard. As you noted, Janine's house, the house further west along Commerce and Chesapeake already has a hedge facing Commerce Street, so that visually it already has a touch of that in there. And again, as people who would be looking at it every day when we got up, our only request would be tasteful, and I would suggest that it be set back from the curbside, because oftentimes when there are events at Tidings Park, people do park there, and you ought to leave enough space so that they can get out of their car on the grass side rather than have to exit into traffic. But otherwise, we're fine with it.
Thank you. And just to allay your mind on that, the property line does set back, so they would have to put a fence inside their property so that you got at least 5 feet to get out of a car.
And that's just a practical matter.
Now, thank you. I'm just gonna work right around. Somebody back in the back corner. Mm-hmm. And name and address, please.
Hi, Dan Lambros, 614 South Market Street. The only concern I have is unintended consequences. When you look at an alley and you decide that that has got to be the back, if the through lot has a potential for subdivision and that now the alley would become the front, I would be concerned if any legislation or code would prohibit that. Good deal?
Yes, sir. In order to subdivide a property that's on a lane, that subdivision would have to meet all of the other lot specification requirements.
Gotcha.
And the front yard would have to be on the lane. Mm-hmm. And so their front setback would come into play. And by the time you meet all those specifications, quite frankly, it discourages a lot of that sort of thing that you're concerned about. It discourages the breaking up of those lots. But we do have a provision for cottages, I think. In
Accessory dwelling units, right? Then that wouldn't be a subdivision. It would be on one continuous property.
It'd be one lot with two buildings on it.
I'm not necessarily considering doing it, but
Yeah.
you know, you look at the value
Right.
that you have,
Right.
and you
Right.
try to make sure that you
Sure.
protect it as best you can.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you. I saw a hand over here. Right in the corner. If you'd like to go first. Sure.
Hi.
Hi.
Diane Smith, 655 Commerce Street. I'm directly across the street from the new owner, and it's like the most amazing thing from the 1 week that he moved in to if you take a drive around right now, the house is like, Dr. Lou would be like so excited. That beautiful home is just coming back, and I think that Sean has a very tasteful fence that he would probably have in mind. I would definitely go for him doing that, because I think it would just add so much character to his home. So,
Thank you.
all right.
Thank you.
Next.
Good evening. My name is Ralph Watts. I live at 659 Commerce Street, directly across from the hedges that you were talking about. And knowing that how the homes have evolved over the years and the way that Mr. Edgar has enhanced the home in the last month that he's been there. I always kid him that he's done more in one day than I usually did in 4 months of that type of work. Amazing. But we have, if nothing else, we have seen an improvement that is going to raise property values. The idea of having 2 front lawns, when you first said that, and I saw the zoning, and I went, this is ridiculous. I agree. I hope you pursue that to the best of your ability. And I'm just wanting to ensure or reassure you all that from a neighbor perspective, I think we're all in agreement that what Mr. Edgar is doing in that home will benefit us all.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this? Yes, sir.
Jim McCauley, 601 Chesapeake Drive. I'm in Freeborn Brown's house. And I've got, I guess, 3 front lawns because I'm right on the edge. And we don't live on Stoke Street. That ends at Commerce Street. I live on Chesapeake Drive, 601 Chesapeake Drive. And so our front is right on the start of Chesapeake Drive. But if you look at what Freeborn Brown did, he was a lawyer. He was the town lawyer and had his own practice. And he set up his office on Commerce Street. So there's a front door there. But we have a front door at that intersection. Our backyard is on Chesapeake Drive. So it's the intersection, if you want to say our front yard. You should be able to tell when you go there. And I agree with the previous speakers here about him. I think he's going to do a great job there already. It's coming around wonderfully. We do have a hedge, not a fence, but a forsythia hedge between his house, Dr. Lou's former house, and our place, that perpendicular to Commerce and Chesapeake Drive. And so let's see what happens. I mean, he's doing a great job. He's working like mad over there, and at the moment, I just can't complain.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Jan Vanderhoff, 553 Commerce Street. Of course, we agree with it because he has improved the property tremendously already. But I would like to make the statement that this young man was not given a letter or notified of this meeting tonight. One of the other neighbors got a copy of the letter, gave it to him and to me, and I talked to the neighbors or solicited their support for this because Mr. Egger was not afforded a copy of the letter that, announced this meeting. And I think that's a shortcoming on the city's part.
Yeah. Excuse me, what is your address again?
553 Commerce Street.
Okay. Thank you.
Next to the Foley lot. Next to the Foley lot.
Yeah.
Just to clarify for that, since the house was newly purchased, we had a list of all the property owners. It hadn't switched yet. So just the other day, we've got the forwarded letter. Instead of leaving it at the address, we didn't send it certified, but instead of leaving it at the address, they held on to it. And then it said that it had been past the time since the last resident lived there. So they didn't forward it, and then they sent it back to us. So this was just an unlucky thing that the database wasn't updated at the time when all these were sent out, and the post office didn't forward it. But we have that letter in case anybody wants to see that it was returned to us.
Well,
I certainly hope that his neighbors share their positive feedback on his effort.
The guy in the black shirt wants to, the guy in the black shirt, he's trying to get it like 4 times.
oh, yes. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sean Edgar, 609 Chesapeake Drive.
Oh, you're the person everybody's talking about.
Yeah, I'm that guy. But no, I did. I applied for a fence, and I was told you cannot have a fence. You have 2 front yards.
Okay.
And of course, my reaction was, no, there's no such thing. They don't sell a house, build a house, 2 front yards. And of course, but this is what I was told.
Yeah.
So, I went through everything, and luckily enough, I have great support from my neighbors, but I do agree with you, sir, and you. I think I think the front of the house should be the address side. That was how the permit was pulled. It should be side the front of the house, no difference. And he said the backyard before had a large place set that, you know, compared to the cities. So, and that's what I applied for. I applied for a fence for Commerce side. All my neighbors, they've seen what I've done. The fence I picked out is very tasteful. I drew it all out, applied for everything, and showed them everything. Survey done, I had everything done I was asked for, then I was told that I live in an R1 district and not allowed to have the fence. Like I said, I did not get a letter about this meeting, and then I did call, and then I was told the wrong date of the meeting, which was going to be tomorrow instead of today, after I called and checked up on it. So it's been a little bit of a headache, to say the least, but I'm just trying to build a fence for Indy. And that's all I've been trying to do. And that was my first project when I moved in the house, and I haven't been able to get to it yet, and that's all I'm trying to do.
Well, thanks to your situation, we're probably able to, hopefully we'll be able to correct a lot of stuff for a lot of people in the future.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and hopefully. I haven't heard yet anybody that is in support of the two front yard concept.
No, I don't know how that ever happened
Yeah.
anyway. So
Yeah.
that's the thing I heard.
Well, some of this stuff gets established early on. Some of it's just institutionalized, and people don't really think about it until somebody has a situation like yours. And then all of a sudden people say, wait a minute, this isn't right. You know, we got to fix it.
Oh, I agree. It just seemed like such a simple request.
Yeah, yeah.
People, you know, like to have, you know, so, and I asked for all the rules.
But our staff, our city staff, has to go by the book, whatever the book says.
I agree.
And they're required to. And so you know, I guess things like this come to a head when it comes before a commission with a sitting city council person on the commission. And I think we know what to do going forward.
All right, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Is there anything else you would like for us to weigh in on?
No, I think this is great. This was the conversation that we wanted to have. Like I said, we went a parallel route. We had the city attorney make a ruling on the existing code. So the permit that's in now will be ruled based on that city attorney's ruling. And then we need to make code changes for future situations.
Thank you. You all have anything else about this? Okay. Thank you. Now,
Oh, Tammy has something.
is there anything else?
Tammy has something.
I just wanted to say to all the citizens that came out to support your neighbor, I really appreciate that, and it's awesome to see Havre de Grace citizens supporting one another. So thank you very much.
Are there any other business for the commission before we gavel out? For the good of the commission? Nothing? Okay, the planning commission meeting now adjourned.
Get any chance to talk to us again tonight?
I move that the planning commission meeting be adjourned.
Second.
All right, we're now going to move into a more informal session. You all are welcome to stick around if you want to hear what we're going to do, or if you need to take off, we certainly understand. We won't hold that against you.
See you later.
Diane, we're going to stay up here. Yes. It's just easier and the mics work better.
No water now? Yeah.
Want to take a quick break?
Bathroom break.
All right, let's take 5 minutes.
Bye, Diane. Bye, all. Thank you. There were other
The comprehensive plan workshop will now begin. And Diane Clare, you'd like to make a presentation to us.
Yes, I would very much like to make a presentation to you. This is a delayed presentation. We ended up having to postpone last month's presentation, so it's going to end up being a combined session. So we are going to move forward to work session 4. I want to actually revisit with you all the public input that we received and how to revisit the visions that were set out. And we'll also go over Sustainable Communities Actions and the Community Facilities chapter tonight. And I will make this relatively quick. I know it's been a long evening already, but I really didn't want to postpone again. And just going through the public input, the comments we've received through story maps, we had a really good turnout. The surveys were posted for 5 months from September 1st to the end of January. We had 102 completed surveys, 26 questions total among the 7 story maps, 3 to 5 questions each. Of the possible 389 responses, we got about an 82% hit on those returns. I supplied those, all of those comments back to everybody. We're going to try to embed them in the comprehensive plan document itself. We had amazing responses. So over the course of the 5 months, we had over 5,000 views. And this is just a graphic showing of the 7 story maps, the rise in viewership over that time. We don't need to get into it. If you want, I can put this online so you can look at it more fully. But each of the story maps, we could keep the number of views and the responses, and keep the information about it. I'm not sure why my screen is going blank now.
Oh, thanks, everybody. Is that it?
Hang on for a second. Yeah, there's nothing happening.
That's a nice piece of work you did there.
Yeah. Can you hold that, actually, Jimmy? Can you hold what? Yeah, we have to restart it. Sorry about that. Community engagement. Of the 102 responses, the major takeaways that we got, impressions as a whole, what people cared about most, positives: safe, connected, livable community, healthy, active, sustainable lifestyles that Havre Grace offers, really focused in on tourism, events, and small business and historic character and charm. Envision Havre Grace as the story map got the largest amount of views, followed by history and cultural tourism, and then you can see the gradations down from that as far as the amount of viewership. What people were concerned about: protection of water resources and habitat, affordable housing, lack of functional non-motorized mobility infrastructure, healthcare options, connecting diverse communities, and inclusiveness. So it was really neat just to see what people really responded to. And what people want to see in Havre Grace. I won't go through all of these, but it was really interesting and sort of stuff that kind of intuitively knew. People want to see walkways and bikeways. Our walkable community is a really great asset, and people want to expand on that. Preservation of history hit high, improving Route 40, more to waterfront access, community engagement, sidewalks again mentioned, parking, and then it tapers off from there. Other themes of importance of respondents: downtown restoration, the fact that we're a diverse, creative, progressive community resonated a considerable amount. Accessibility for all abilities, preservation of natural resources, increasing transit options, water resource protection, and often mentioned was a bike ped crossing the Susquehanna River. And when we did a word cloud from the analytics of the surveys, the first question that was asked out of Envision Havre Grace are, what are your priorities for Havre Grace over the next 20 years? And it's interesting what comes up as far as the number of hits that each mention got. And this is the size of the word is indicative of how much it was mentioned. So things that we knew about, but it's great to see validated. Our downtown, our community, sidewalks, historic, walkable, all of those things really come to the surface. So there was general agreement with the 7 visions that we outlined in the story maps. And for tonight, what I'd really like to focus on, in theory, we don't need to get into it too fully, but revisiting the visions and goals, those seven visions that were outlined, get into sustainable community actions to a degree, and then also just do highlights from the community facilities chapter that I provided to you earlier or late last week. This is not the same one. This is a different presentation. This is my presentation from before. So you won't have the full thing. I think we can actually, you have to hit the icon. I think what was loaded was on the icon on the main front. This is from last week. Can you hit here? Great, thank you. That's perfect. So these were the stated visions: healthy community, inclusive community, vibrant, connected, essential cultural, historic hub, cohesive, human-scaled, built environment, green, more sustainable community, and fiscally sound government. From the community feedback we received, they reordered it a little bit, and I set the order that we got the most hits on, but that's how it played out, and there was a fair amount of approval. And interested in seeing if we can also validate those visions. This was something that I put forward back in November, and I have the sheets that I handed out at that time. We don't have to do this tonight, but I kind of want to bring back sort of our bigger principles related to our general overriding visions, and see if we can get some agreement from there, and then develop goals. In addition, tonight, I'd like to talk about the sustainable community. We went away with action item homework from 2 months ago. And just to restate from the February meeting what the sustainable community areas are, it's everything east of the CSX, and there are 7 revitalization areas. And these are the Main Street districts, the waterfront, Old Town, US 40, Gateway corridors, Revolution Street, and industrial areas. And love to actually think about trying to come together, not tonight to talk about the action items that were developed, but working into maybe a subcommittee to talk about these action items so we can continue to move forward for all the 7 revitalization areas. And this is a zoom in of the sustainable community map in general. And going through this was the Main Street district, the waterfront as mapped, Old Town, US 40, with example actions that we had discussed from February, but wanted to see your feedback about what you think about these action items, Gateway Road corridors, and the Revolution Street communities, and last, the industrial area. So we'll be developing those action items over time, and like to elicit your feedback as far as what you guys had put forward for these different areas as individuals and as smaller working units. And in general, we'll be looking at identifying general actions for the sustainable community chapter, just to cover the bases for all things sustainability in the city, whether it's Certified Maryland, our green team, farmers markets, and living shorelines, and all things sustainable. Just want to have a general catch-all for action items. And then just a community facilities, the chapter overview for the public to know, community facilities. This chapter is a required element of the, under Maryland Department of Planning, and that has been provided to you all as of Friday. It goes into parks, recreation, and open space, museums and cultural facilities, schools, public buildings, and health facilities. Parks and Recreation is really guided to a large degree by Harford County's Land Preservation Parks and Recreation Plan. They do a lot to benefit the city and account for the open space that we have. For instance, the promenade was built in conjunction with Harford County Parks and Recreation. We are the beneficiaries of a lot of open space along Oakington Peninsula, about 1,400 acres now, where we have direct access to those areas, and it's pretty amazing how we're gifted here with a lot of public open space. So it also goes into our local parks, privately held parks like Stansel Field and marinas, indoor recreation areas, school playfields, and trails that connect. And this is just a graphic from the story maps that talks about why open space is so important for our health and just healthy Havre Grace, what that means as far as environment, connections, and physical state of being. So, and just some more graphics of some of the benefits of living where we do. Trail connections, there's a separate map for that. And then we get into museum and cultural facilities. It discusses the five museums that we have, and then the 2 theater facilities, the Opera House and now the Star Center. Many of these improvements have been really amped up since the last comprehensive plan, and some of these are brand new. We have a really dynamic arts and entertainment district and a great art scene that also connects all of these pieces together. And then third is the public schools. We have 2 elementary schools, Havre Grace and Meadowvale, but we're also with Harford County's rebalancing or balancing enrollment. Roy Williams will really come into play as well, and we'll be looking at expanding our reach in many ways towards the Oakington Peninsula. We also have 1 secondary school, which we're really proud of, the combined middle school, high school complex, which is a huge asset in the center of the city. And you know, all of these pieces really play well with where we're going as a town. There's a slide on the balancing enrollment. The middle school, high school area was accounted for this year as far as the balancing enrollment. And for the elementary schools where Roy Williams will come into play is in the 26-27 school year timeframe. Public buildings, library we have the benefit of through Harford County, as well as the Havre Grace Activity Center, which is near the high school, middle school, high school complex. And then the normal public buildings that we have to outline: City Hall, Police Department, Visitor Center, EMS. We have 5 firehouses for Susquehanna Hose Company, and then all the public works buildings, whether it's water treatment, wastewater treatment, or the DPW complex. And from the Havre Grace restoration of the downtown, there was an idea of a civic spine. We're trying to embed pieces of that within this plan to really reach to that restoration design. It's a real call out about the downtown area as far as physical improvements, but we want to extend that into the whole idea of the civic spine and how Pennington Avenue really connects the recreation area and the school of the middle school, high school complex down to the downtown and the Washington Street, Festival Street, ideally. We have the Opera House, we have City Hall and the Star Center, and all of these uses along this really strengthened spine. And we need to continue to build on that. And lastly, it was an interesting section to write was the changing healthcare delivery in Harford County, the issues of Harford Memorial Hospital, which will be closing probably within the next year and a half, and then Upper Chesapeake Health, Bel Air, and the Aberdeen Center, as well as the increased behavioral health and addiction treatment crisis treatment that is available now within Harford County. In addition, other medical facilities like the MedStar Health Medical Facility and private nursing care is also described in this chapter. So that's just to wrap up on that chapter, but we definitely look forward to continuing, whoops. Your hat? Continuing, yes. Continuing to have dialogue, and whether it would be good to actually go and build in some subcommittee time for discussing action items. I think it would be really beneficial to be able to have additional conversations because of the regular planning commission meetings taking so long. So I don't know if you are game for that and how that might look. Just, I'd really love to enlist your help to be able to further this effort.
Thank you, Diane. Diane and I have had some discussions up to now about how to, I mean, this is a very time-intensive
Yes.
effort, not only on the part of the staff, and particularly Diane. She's lived and breathed this stuff for darn near a year.
Yeah.
And the only way that we can really have meaningful input is to spend more direct time discussing the elements of this plan and even coming up with recommendations that are more than just an individual recommendation. And the problem we have with a workshop environment is we're all sitting here together and we have to meet the open meetings requirements and all that sort of thing, and everything we do and say has to be recorded in such a way that they can go back and see where these ideas came from and how this plan was generated. But one way to make this process a lot more efficient is to operate as subcommittees. In other words, if you consider the whole committee as the Planning Commission, the subcommittees would be small groups of commissioners meeting on a particular topic. And I guess the idea would be to divide some of these topics up among us.
And then bring it back to the whole
So
group.
one subcommittee deals with one topic, and the next one deals with the next. Now, our commission is made up of 7 volunteer members and 1 city council person. And one of the 7 volunteer members is an alternate. And the alternate is just as much a commissioner as any of the rest of us. It's just that, and the alternate would almost always be in a position to vote on things because we almost never would have 8 people here.
Do we have an alternate anymore?
Not currently.
Currently, you got promoted, and so we thought you were doing such a terrible job that we decided to promote you up. Like that's the old Peter principle, they call that in business. No, actually, the mayor has not appointed a new commissioner yet, and our tradition, although this is not set in stone, our tradition is the new commissioner always becomes the alternate. And then the next time there's a vacancy, that person moves up. And that's kind of the way we've operated. It's not in the ordinance, but that's just the way we operate. And so the mayor's on board with that concept, and he would appoint the new person as, quote, the alternate. But as far as working on this comp plan, as far as I'm concerned, even the alternate needs to be totally bought into what we're doing. And another good way to do that is to let them also serve as a subcommittee person. Nobody gets off the hook except our city council liaison person.
Yes.
I suspect you're busy enough
Yes.
to not be tied up in subcommittee stuff here. Is that correct? Is that a good assumption?
I am, in fact, very busy. However, I do want to be a part of this comprehensive planning sessions. I am willing to give a little of my time.
Well, that's
And
nice.
I think it would be beneficial to help you all work 8 to 5 if we could come in the afternoon.
Right.
During your work hours. I have teacher hours, so, some of y'all are retired. So I think
You don't have any time when you're retired, everything.
No time, I know, it
Now-
all flies, but,
I believe everybody on this commission, except for Farhat, is either retired or self-employed. Is that a fair statement?
I'm a teacher.
Excluding you.
Oh,
You've already
excluding
said you
me.
were a
Oh.
teacher. Yeah, that you would, but even as a teacher, you can slip in here a little earlier than, as you said, you could probably late afternoon, something like that. The other problem with us meeting continuously as a big group is that it requires administrative support, you know, to run the audio visuals, to open the place up after hours and all those things, and that costs the city a lot of money because, you know, that time, these people don't work 90-hour weeks, you know, so the city has to comp that out one way or the other. And so for many reasons, it makes sense for us to meet as committees of, can 2 people be a committee?
Yeah, 2 or 3. Yeah, and it would
Well,
just,
if
I don't
we-
know if certain people are more interested in writing
Yeah.
than others, and the whole idea is not to, is to bring it forward to the larger committee. I mean,
Well,
to
if
create
we've-
actions and to move through these chapters, because all of these chapters require action.
Okay, if we do a 2-3-2, let's see, 2 and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 of us. So it'd be a 2-3-3. No, it was a committee of 3, a committee of 3, and a committee of 2. That gives us 3 working committees.
I wasn't sure if everybody likes to write.
And another way to do it is to just all of us be committees of 2, and that gives you 4 committees. But when you say write, what are you thinking of?
As far as taking the material, number one, I'd like feedback on the chapters, but also taking what's written and then turning those into action items. And it doesn't need to be that we have multiple committees. We could just have one writing committee if there are people that are so inclined to just kind of chunk out sort of the big picture. It's good to have it in common writing. It's just a way to think about it, because I know not everybody can give as much time.
Well, now, you're talking about
So-
2 things. Are you talking about reviewing what's already been written?
Right. It's taking that and then turning that into action. A list of where we're going from here. This is what is. There are some threaded policies throughout that. Maybe they need to be bolstered. But certainly where the meat of things happens to me is where we develop action items based
Okay.
on what is. So,
So what you're calling an action item would really be what we would probably call a recommendation going forward.
correct.
A
However you
recommendation
wanna-
for implementation. Is that?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and now we're talking. All
However,
right.
yeah,
Because what's a plan if you can't implement it?
exactly.
Yeah. So, and when you say writing, we would basically just propose the implementation and put that down the best we can in words.
Right, correct.
And then we'd submit it back to you, and you would wordsmith
I would like
it.
to be, I can be part of the committee. I mean, to me, it's beneficial conversation.
Okay. So you'd really like to be in
partaking.
on each one of these committee meetings?
No, I don't want to make multiple. I'd like to try to smooth it out so that we have an efficient use of time and maybe we just start it as a pilot and do
Okay.
one.
Here's what,
And try to see who gels as far as who are writers, who wants to take this and try to, and turn it into action.
first of all, let me ask fellow commissioners here, are you up for this?
Sure.
Approach?
Sure.
I'm a writer.
Okay. And I write and, you know, and all that, write for a living.
I have never known that.
So, why don't we do this? We need to take the bull by the horns here. We're going to need some initial instruction from you, what we're going to need you to do. And you could just email it straight to us.
Right.
I need you to propose a schedule
Okay.
of implementation, and I need you to flesh out that schedule with specific tasks that you want us to tackle. And in other words, you can call it, I think it's probably best if we work it as a committee of three, and a committee of two, so we got 3 committees working all the time. You think that's the best structure?
I'm not sure. I'm trying to make it, huh?
What would you suggest?
Time is of the essence, and I'm trying to actually, I'm writing, and then also I need your guidance on stuff. I would love to do a committee of 3 as a pilot to figure out how the action, flesh one out and see how it rolls.
So just create one committee to start with.
Probably, or at least get some grounding. I hadn't thought this far ahead, but yeah, at least get some grounding to try to just, there's getting the action items back that everybody individually had done for the sustainable communities element. I'd love to get that feedback. Anything, Warren sent me his information. I'd love to get that back, and unfortunately we missed last session.
Well, see,
so if there's anything you want to submit to me,
we could probably work best and most efficiently if you basically assigned us to a task.
Okay.
Because that way you know best what you need the soonest.
Okay.
And you know best how big or how small that chunk of the whole deal should be, because you're the one that's writing the whole thing.
Yeah, and you know where you need the help.
And if we can, I think we can function most efficiently if we're just flat out given a specific assignment.
Okay, and everybody's game for it. Everybody wants to. Okay.
And I don't have a problem with, I don't care which topic it is. And it doesn't have to be something that I'm just really into. I'm speaking for myself here.
Right.
Whatever you assign me, I'll take on.
Okay.
Yes.
I said, I want something I'm really into. I want the passion to.
Yes, to flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
But
I don't want to do healthcare.
That was the other thing.
Well, that's fine.
I'm just being honest.
Yeah. I mean, I can think of a bunch of things that I'd like to, and we already did that a couple of meetings ago. We sort of doled out some assignments that most of us didn't follow through with, because we didn't have somebody cracking the whip behind us.
Okay.
And that's
I volunteered to do waterfront and the trails.
Correct.
And, when I started working on that, I think it was like 3 months ago, we put those little things out. And then, so I have questions, and we haven't had a meeting to discuss any of this thing. And I think we should still stick to that plan. You were downtown or something?
Yes, that was all for the sustainable communities actions. Yep.
And we could go from there, because I need information on what happens to the property that for the dam that they gave to somebody. Is that going to be controlled by Havre Grace, or do we get any of that?
The city will ideally be receiving portions that relate to areas south of Route 40.
So the area south of Route 40, but we're not going up the Joe K Trail.
It's my understanding that it's south of Route 40, and the assets that we already hold there, and the other portions would be in preservation. So, yep.
The other thing was there's only a couple parcels of land left in the city that are considered waterfront that are not in private hands, or I guess they are in private hands, and so it's like, does anybody know the secret behind the Bully Rock Marina property?
You mean the oil contamination?
No, that was out in the water. That wasn't on the property.
Oh, well. Those of us in Bully Rock were told that the development could not go forward, the marina could not go forward because the property was contaminated and they couldn't turn a spade without having a problem with MDE approval.
Now, they had the Gilberts had the study that was done, and all the contamination down the river, it's not on the Gilbert property.
I can't speak to any of that, and you're gonna have to speak into the mic.
Okay.
But I don't, yeah, as far as getting into the specifics, it would be great, and maybe it would be as far as getting back the action items that you may have created, or whether we need to have further conversations in a smaller subcommittee situation. That would be ideal. So, assuming Farhat, she has to work. So I'm not going to volunteer her if that's all right. But do we want to do 3 and 3, or how?
Well,
would
we
it
don't
be?
necessarily have to work. I mean, we could schedule a subcommittee or a committee meeting in City Hall at the same time that some other commission is meeting, so that City Hall is already open and we could just come and just dive into another room, because it's only going to be
True.
2 or 3 of us, and that way we don't tie up staff and we don't tie up anybody. We don't bother anybody, but we can come in here and meet, and we could meet at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the evening.
You have to advertise those.
No, not if it's a committee.
If it's subcommittee of a certain, if it's not a quorum, and certainly all the materials would be brought back to the larger group, because it would be part of the chapter. The whole idea is that the body of the chapters builds the foundation.
5 people was a quorum to hold a meeting.
4, not 5.
Okay, so if you have 3, that's a majority.
No.
3
I'm not sure
would be
where you're coming from
acceptable.
on that, but
What I'm coming from is you
can put this.
have an advertised meeting so you don't violate the Open Meetings Act. And if you show up with a majority of the committee, that if the minimum required to have a meeting is 4, and you show up with 3, that's the majority of the 4 that could come and vote on something the next time.
3 out of 7 or 8 is a subcommittee. It's for conversation. Then you bring the materials back.
But my question is, how many of those 7 or 8 people need to be present in order for a planning commission meeting to kick off?
we have to have 4 people to constitute a quorum for a planning commission meeting like tonight. As long as we got 4 people sitting in this room, we can go ahead and meet, and we can vote, and we can do everything. But if we're short one, we're hurting. We can also have 4 people that show up for the meeting, and I call the roll, and I establish quorum, like I always do at the beginning of the meeting. And then if somebody has to walk out, like Farhat had to leave early, we can still function. We can still vote and operate and everything else, because we already established quorum. Or if somebody has to step out of the room because of a conflict, we can still meet, we still have a quorum, but we have to establish it first. Now, as far as what we're calling I wouldn't even call this subcommittee. I would just call this
Work groups.
a work group or a meeting, just a meeting, as long as we keep the meeting under the quorum required for the planning commission. We're not subject to the Open Meetings Act. In other words, we can have committees of up to 3 people. We can't have a committee of 4.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
It's like 3 city council members can meet down in the local bar and talk about city business all night long.
We don't, though.
But they're not a
They
quorum.
meet down there and they drink, they don't talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can certainly send this out to everybody and try to determine how to plug in.
Yeah.
An alternate evening, we could do what has always been the counter, the 4th Monday of the month, if we want to do a set evening meeting, if evenings are better for a work group of that nature, or we can do daytime. I don't know everybody's schedule. if you have a preference.
I'll also submit that we don't have to meet in City Hall.
Correct.
We don't have to meet in a public building. My corporate center has 2 conference rooms. We can meet down at my corporate center if there's short of space up here.
Correct.
Diane, I have EDAB meetings on Wednesdays at 4 o'clock,
Yeah.
third Wednesday of the month at 4 o'clock. Be happy to come early or whatever.
Okay.
So the other thing that we should avoid doing in these little meetings is taking any kind of formal vote. And that's to Jimmy's point. What we should do is just come up with recommendations, make a list out on a piece of paper, and then report back to the Planning Commission with these recommendations. But no raise your right hand voting.
These are just brainstorming.
Yeah, these are just
Brainstorming
sessions.
and,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
creating text,
right.
creating the body of action.
Because we would not be taking any official action in these
No,
meetings.
we wouldn't be able to.
Yeah. Yeah, so
It's to
let's
help guide the plan.
let's do this.
I say we designate Diane to take the bull by the horns here and just set these things up
Okay,
and do it, because
that's fun.
if you leave it to us, there's too much diverse thought here. You drive it, and I think we can do it.
And I would like for you to prioritize the topics too, based on your work.
Yeah, it is really helpful to have 4 chapters completed so that we can start to weave it together based on the body of work that's already been done from my thinking, and that
Now,
just keep.
are these committees also going to be dealing with just reading the comp plan, giving it a going over?
I'm hoping all of you guys are doing that anyway.
Well, yeah, but
and
that's not
certainly-
organized. See, that just means that everybody says they looked at it, and
Well, the whole idea is that you pull from the text what needs to be created as actions. What are the next steps? Where are we going from here?
okay.
So yeah, it's
Can we
definitely helpful.
Can we see the last one for guidance?
The last comprehensive plan?
plan.
Yeah, it's online. It's, this is a little bit meatier, as far as each one gets a little bit more, it's number one, dictated by Maryland Department of Planning, what the content is. And in some cases, we're building on and fleshing out further, but it's there online already, and I can give you the link.
Please.
So
I can
it's,
tell
yeah,
you that
city.
the character of the past comprehensive plans are all different from each other, and this comp plan is, she was being very humble when she said it was a little meatier. This comp plan is light years better than anything that's ever been produced here.
And then maybe we don't want to know what the other one was, if that's
I
what you
mean,
think.
that's
would
not going to be a
best.
guide for you, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
We continue to build. We absolutely continue to build on past work. So, and trying to not recreate the way things are, when we talked about the Sustainable Communities chapter, all of those revitalization areas were set back in the 1990s, actually, and we keep building on those. They've been successful for grant writing and for characterizing the city. So, trying to have those themes continue forward.
So you're going to just
Maybe we
say,
should
okay,
strip some
work
of that
group,
out, but,
I'm going to
yeah.
assign you this particular little subject area, and this is a part of the comp plan I want you to take it from, and this is what I want from you.
Well, and I'm hoping that you'll be seeing a theme through these chapters,
Oh,
and
no,
then how, how they,
But don't
How they
be
lay out.
afraid, Diane, to be assertive with.
But I can guarantee you we'll be more productive the more specific you are,
okay, yep,
all right? There's no question about that.
okay. Yep, I need feedback. It's great.
Yeah.
So,
Stick a finger in our eye and say, this is what I want.
Otherwise, we'll just meet, drink a beer, and say, man, that's cool. And
Look how
we
pretty
could
it
meet
is.
off-site. This is true. Writing is much better that way.
Yeah, beer may help.
is anything else that we need to?
Nope.
We good?
No, a couple of announcements. Real briefly, Preservation Maryland is actually doing a pop-up field office here tomorrow from 10 to 3 at the Gallery 220, which was the former Artists Emporium. They are here. It's really, really great. They're going and doing these pop-up field offices all around the state, and we're the Harford County location for that. And again, that's tomorrow from 10 to 3, if anybody's interested in coming out and just seeing what they're doing.
Is that a 4-hour presentation, or you just drop in?
No, it's a drop-in, meetup. Preservation Maryland is an advocacy group, and it's just come in and talk, and I think Hartford 250 will be present, Harford County Historic Preservation, Town of Bel Air. We tried to enlist Aberdeen. I'm not sure if they'll be here, just for historic preservation kinds of efforts. So that's happening tomorrow, and just wanted to make a plug for that. And that's it. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get out of here.
Okay.
Thanks for reminding me about that event.